Great. So welcome, Jeff and Jim, and maybe Hyacinth will join us shortly. But yeah, Jim, you were just about to tell us about yourself.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so as a sort of main career, I'm a stage director. I've sort of studied kind of traditionally, did a theatre directing course there at the drama centre, which was a drama school at in the Central St Martin's building in King's Cross. But then I transferred to do a degree in comedy and satire at Goldsmiths, and that was a great environment because I'm quite interested how performance more kind of broadly intersects with the humanities and arts and culture and philosophy and stuff. And I've just done a master's in opera directing at the Royal Welsh College Conservatoire in Wales. But yeah, and a lot of, at the moment, a lot of my work is specifically around sound art and audio drama. I'd love to do. I'm working towards a PhD. I'll do in a few years in specifically science fiction and fantasy in sound art and audio drama.
Wow.
But then I just kind of make. At the moment, I think now that I've graduated, I'm sort of experimenting. Is it more sort of traditional theatre and kind of because I have a foundation in the classics, or is it live art? And so, in terms of my own personal practice, and then yeah, in terms of the opera and the music, I mean, I love anything from second Viennese school to contemporary dance music to classical opera to music from the global south and stuff. And so that's it. But one of the reasons why I wanted why I was looking for vocal lessons is because I'm doing a band that sort of takes jazz, funk and dub, but combines avant-garde, experimental elements. But I have a big interest in Eastern philosophy and Tai Chi and Buddhism as well. So it just seems like the perfect mashup of things. So that's quite a long answer.
I love it.
I mean, it's a very rich answer.
I love the mashup approach is after my own heart as well. So we will follow up with that in a moment. Let's just hear briefly from Jeff.
Well, as you can see, I'm not at the beginning of my life. I'm in the how can I say, the crowning glory of my life, in fact, because things that I can do now I couldn't do when I was younger. So I mean, I trained. Well, my theatre work started I was born in South Africa and I grew up there, and my theatre work started when I went to an audition for the rock musical Hair. Way back, and I got a part. I looked the part then, and I somehow got a part. I could sing, I could dance a little bit, and that took me out of Africa and brought me into Europe. I arrived in Portugal after touring South Africa for a while. Well, not South Africa, it was banned in South Africa, so we were performing in Lesotho. And then reached Portugal, performed there, and then in Spain, and then came to London and studied what is called in German Sprachgestaltung. If you translate that directly into English, it would be speech ensoulment, because a gestalt is not a form, but that tends to be then translated as speech form or creative speech, and with drama involved in that as well. So I finished in 78, and have been working ever since on various projects. This is all very much logos spiritual based work. It's not just nice, beautiful sounds. So there's a spiritual element inherent in this work. From Rudolf Steiner, if you've heard of the name. That's the fundament behind it all. And yes, I've been working with that for years and years and years and years and years, which is in a way to bring the speech voice into life as opposed to abstraction. On top of that, I've done a lot of singing because I'm always in the plays that I've been in, Shakespeare mostly, but also children's plays, we've always sang. And then I joined a group in Poland and we did Gregorian drama. So I've done a lot of that kind of singing as well. and I'm just interested in everything to do with sound.
Great. So maybe we can ask Jim, what drew you to the vocal Tai Chi idea? And, you know, I think you've had a little look at my work, and what's the call there for you?
Well, it's one of those interesting things where, you know, I
maybe I should say hello to Go Ivy.
no worries.
Hello. Is that Hyacinth?
Yes, I'm just needing to change my name
Oh yes.
because I use it for work. So at work, yeah, anyway, it's like the more simple word,
Okay.
more simple name. So
Okay. Right. Sorry, Jim. So there's Jim and Jeffrey. We've just done introductions. Perhaps you can just pick up as we go along, because we've been talking for about 5 minutes. Yeah. So just anything you want to say, Jim, on that?
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting because, you know, I was looking for kind of vocal training or, you know, practice for a sort of specific project, but it's interesting how it also links so much to my own creative work as well. Just the kind of the approach really interests me, and yeah, it just feels very holistic, and that actually, you know, although coming at it from a place of voice, how much I'll find I'm using those techniques or you know, methods of working for you know, broader ranges. Sorry, losing my ability to speak. Yeah, for just how it seems to lend itself to sort of cross-disciplinary practice, and also echoing what Jeff said as well. I mean, I'm really interested in Eastern philosophy, theology in general, theosophy, occult studies, and just studies of religion, and so yeah, I really like the idea that because of its holistic approach, it also offers things for your sort of life in general, and promoting wellness and things like that. I think that's yeah, there's so much about it that I find really intriguing.
Cool, thank you. Well, I'd love to hear from Hyacinth. Just to say, Hyacinth, that Jim has just done his MA in opera directing. He's also trained in theatre, and as you can hear, he's got wide-ranging interests across a number of subjects. And Jeff has been, for many years, working with the Rudolf Steiner approach to speech and spirit. How's that for a summary? Hyacinth, tell us a bit more about yourself so that we know who's in the room.
yeah, firstly, I want to say it's very interesting, both your backgrounds, and you know, I've heard about Rudolf Steiner and very interested, you know, about him and his practices, but haven't really delved much into it. And I'm not really from a music background, but I have like you know, become interested in voice and expression, you know, the connection of movement, vocal expression, music, notes in relation to, like, you know, holistic well-being, as well as like spirituality, you know, increasing consciousness, like increasing the frequency of, like, you know, the collective. Um, I'm also interested in like exploring and maybe, you know, honing my leadership skills as well. Um, but I think my main you know, attraction to this is really about exploring myself, being able to really, you know, find and connect with the innermost or deepest part of myself, the most authentic, in a way that's not cerebral, and experimental as well. Because I feel like, you know, Jenny, like what really fascinated me from, you know, that 1 hour session in that that Nessie Gomez weekend course. I mean, it's just like the I think it's quite innovative in a way, and evolving. It evolves with the group, but at the same time, it's founded from a lot of different disciplines. So you've mentioned, like, the connection with Tai Chi, and your work as like therapy using voice and trauma release and everything. So I'm just interested in that
Yeah,
combination of, like, the experience that you've had
great.
over, decades plus.
Thank
What
you.
new, the openness to new contribution and ideas from the group, and the flowing nature of the work as well.
Well, I mean, thank you, Hyacinth. I think we're all in the same tribe. Straight away, I can feel, so many cross connections with us all. And it's a very rich vein. And there are so many veins in the rock that, you can go along one and then you turn as a tributary and you go along another, and it can take a whole lifetime. And it has taken, certainly Jeff and myself, being the elder representation here. It's a fascinating encyclopedic research project. So I thoroughly, encourage you, whether you come and work with me or not, to continue your explorations and your intuitive understanding of these things. So I could start from so many places, and I have actually prepared a small reading that I'd like to do. I've written a chapter which is going to be published at the end of this year now, you can say, which is the sort of documentation of my complete sort of journey with leadership and voice and creativity and spirituality. And there's one little sort of one page I thought I might read, which gives a little bit of background about the voice movement therapy, Roy Hart Theatre, Alfred Wolfson lineage, which is what I've sort of come through. And it might just sort of anchor us in a starting point for a wider conversation. So I think I'll do that. And then we can kind of jump into an open share conversation, and you can, question any questions for me for, free flowing hour or so. So let me just share my screen and I'll read this bit. Yeah, this is the bit I wanted to share. Alfred Wolfson. Who's heard of Alfred Wolfson? Yeah. Okay, so I don't know how much you've read about him, but this is just a little summary of his journey, and how it's sort of the beginning of a sort of a lineage which goes through to, well, people like Jerzy Kratowski and so forth were influenced by him, Maxwell Davis. And so it's quite good. There's not much historical writing about him, so I've added this little contribution in my chapter. So here we go. Alfred Wolfson's life, voice, and singing lessons. The 4 placements of the voice is the model at the heart of voice movement therapy, and it has a lineage of practitioners going back to its originator, Alfred Wolfson. Wolfson first taught this revolutionary approach to the singing and sounding voice following the First World War in Berlin from 1935 to 1943. Wolfson, a German Jew, then fled Germany during the Second World War and settled in Golders Green, North London, where he continued teaching from 1943 to 1962 when he died. During the 1950s, Wolfson became unwell and he passed the work to his student, the South African actor Roy Hart, who was at RADA, who had been studying with him since 1947. Alfred Wolfson had initially developed his 4 placements open model of the voice to heal himself from traumatic memories of the First World War. When war broke out in 1914, he was called up, age 19, to be a stretcher bearer in the trenches in Germany. It was a harrowing experience to hear wounded men crying out in agony and shells dropping all around. At one point, he found himself facing a chilling choice, whether to risk his own life to save a friend who was wounded or retreat to safety and save himself. He retreated. Later, he was wounded and left for dead on a pile of corpses. He somehow managed to get himself from there to safety in Holland. The author Mary Lowenthal Feldsteiner has observed that Wolfson had heard the voice of Hitler over loudspeakers many times, and after the war, he desired only one thing: to create a menschliche Stimme, a human voice to mend the fractures of the past. To exorcise these traumatic memories, and one can guess survivor's guilt still haunting him after the war, as part of his recovery in 1920s Germany, he set about voicing out past daemons, these oral hallucinations in his psyche. One can imagine that he let these hallucinatory voices out by expanding his voice at whatever pitched height or depth he needed to meet the memories and feelings of the sounds entrapped within him. In so doing, he managed to neutralize the inner nightmare he was afflicted by. At some point during the process, he named the division of the voices into 4 tessituras, and his view of how far the human voice could travel, no matter your gender, was transformed way beyond the classical model of SATB. By 1935, having healed himself enough, he began sharing his own work on voice with others. He worked with students on song interpretation, which involved men singing women's parts and vice versa against the gender conventions. This and much more about his work and his deep understanding of the human condition is described in a compelling biography by one of his closest students for many years, Sheila Braggins. Wolfson renamed and reinterpreted the standard vocal tessituras SATB to that of a string quartet, violin, viola, cello, and double bass, representing the placements in the voice and, crucially, encouraging men and women to sing across all 4 ranges. This stretching of the voice to its extremes allowed the singer to access more remote parts of themselves, often accessing unconscious material. His unusual singing lessons caught the attention of Peter Brook, Jerzy Grotowski, R.D. Lang, and Lionel Blue, among others, all of whom acknowledged his contribution to their work. In 1962, following the death of Alfred Wolfson, Roy Hart formed a theatre company to develop the applications of Wolfson's work in a new collective theatre approach to voice. Interestingly, Roy Hart performed the premiere of the composition 8 Songs for a Mad King by Sir Peter Maxwell Davies in 1969, a music theatre piece requiring extended vocal technique. The piece was performed by the Pierrot Players at the Queen Elizabeth Hall in London's South Bank. Now, this is a very long 16,000 word chapter, and that's about 500 words or 1,000 words or something. So I just open it up as a starting point for a conversation which may stick in this arena or may travel in any other arena. And please just sort of drop into yourself and just find out what it is that you need from this conversation for yourself. And it's not a didactic lesson. This is an inquiry of how can we help? How can I help? How can I help you? Yes.
I was just curious because I noticed in the modules that there would be like performance towards the there would be a voice performance, right, with selected audience. I was just wondering about that bit because I was thinking more like it's more like a group exercise rather than a performance-based technique. So I was just wondering, what is that for? Is that for like maybe the teaching later on, or you know?
Yes. I mean, you don't have a background in any performance at all, or have you performed before?
Just like, in like an informal course, like stand-up comedy 10 week, 10 sessions or something, but not really.
Okay. Well, I mean, my my sense of it is to call you, if you did the course, you would become certified as an artist leader. So it's a sort of hyphenated title that I think covers enough areas to accommodate a lot of people, and it doesn't have the heaviness of calling you a therapist, which I wanted to avoid. And I think it represents where I'm coming from, artist leader, and it's just a nice double hyphenated way of saying it. So what the apprenticeship will be aiming to do is to elevate both those sides of you. So the artistic and the leadership moving together as a kind of dual evolution of you. So it's like, as you learn something about yourself as you are, which is your artist nature, which is your soul nature, which, if you like, that is where the true artists come from, then that then becomes information for you as to how you will then help others draw on that authentic part of themselves as you take on the role of leader, so that your leadership is coming from your artistry. And so the performance aspect of it, well, that's a kind of, it's almost an old paradigm word now for me, performance. But it's a sharing, which may sound a rather 60s word. There's no ideal word for it, but it's a happening, a ceremonial space where truth is lived through sound, through voice, through expression, and to be witnessed, which you will be throughout the apprenticeship by your fellow apprentices, your colleagues, and people who are joining us as guests. That witnessing is the humanizing, the most humanizing thing for any community at any point in time across the eons. So we see each other, we hear each other. So as an artist leader, you will you sort of need to not only have the techniques, but you need to demonstrate and embody them for yourself and inspire others to do the same. So part of what you'll need to do is to be able to stand up in front of a group, not only of your colleagues, but of also a safe public. So it'll be invited guests, and share yourself from where you stand right on that day, with your voice, with your body, as it is in the space. Yeah, that's it, Jim. We'll come back to you, Hyacinth, if there's anything.
Well, I'm actually just adding on to Hyacinth's point, and I think also I've just been thinking about, also how we sort of deconstruct or reassess, what we think a sort of a traditional performance is, and yeah, and when you say a sharing as well, and that it's yeah, because one of the sort of questions I had, or more of a sort of talking point, was it yeah, I'm sort of interested in the distinction between form, or a kind of music which is formulaic and kind of procedural, and this kind of work, whether it's extended techniques or is more of a holistic spiritual practice, and that sort of space between the two, because because obviously initially, as I said before, I'm sort of doing more kind of, I mean, it's experimental, it's not commercial music, but it's more kind of towards the kind of popular end of music. And I was thinking, would it be like appropriative, to take sort of ideas from Zen and things like that? And I mean, I think the answer is no. I mean, because I love people like Laurie Anderson and Laraji and many artists, who make popular music, and take those those ideas. But it just makes me think quite a lot about that line being blurred, and the distinction between, form and then alternative approaches, and because I think it's not necessarily a personal barrier, but I certainly come from a tradition where you have a sort of classical training in something. You have a kind of classical foundation, and once you have the classical foundation, you know, you then go on and experiment. Although I'm not a classically trained musician, I mean this from a kind of theatre design sort of perspective. But I just think that's interesting. So something, work that's more for yourself, or work that's intended to be presented, and deconstructing that.
Yeah, I mean, along that spectrum, anything is possible. You can set yourself down at any point or at multiple points, you know, from the formed to the free and everything in between, and the meeting of the two in some kind of hybrid relationship as well. And so I wonder if it's the songwriter in you that's sort of going, how am I going to break the mold of these formulaic structures of dub and Afrobeat? And
yeah. Well, I was thinking about things like, and I want to ask about text as well, because with my own work, I was thinking about sort of Burroughs cut-up techniques or text generation as a maybe, you know, so because the text doesn't come from yourself, you can maybe sort of distance yourself from it in a way that is then is more free. But what I was going to say, Hyacinth, sorry, I have ADHD, so sometimes my thoughts can be a bit all over the place sometimes. What I was going to say, Hyacinth, is that I think it's not a performance in the sense that, you know, it's either kind of successful or unsuccessful, or it's being judged, but actually it's a good performance if you as a performer, you know, feel that you've explored what it is that you're aiming to explore. And more of a sharing in that sense.
Lovely walk round your mind to get to where you wanted to go.
That's what I initially intended to say.
It seems to me, I mean, this is what happens in my work as well, is that actually you don't speak for your own sake. You speak in order to make a relationship with the other. And it feels to me that is really what this kind of performance really is. It's a meeting of self and other, which also reaffirms self. Because if you just stay with yourself, and then you do the normal performance to show how good you are, and that actually is egotism, not really true experience of self, and certainly is not helpful as a leader. You can't lead out of that. So it's really about sharing and meeting. That's what it feels to me like. And anything to do with sound, with the voice, we've got a voice in order to meet, in order to express and meet others. And from the spiritual large logos, the so-called harmony of the spheres element, it's a relationship of the planets moving through the fixed stars. And it's like an instrument. You've got an instrument, you run your fingers over, let's say, a lyre, and it's the meeting of your fingers with the strings which produce the tones. And in this case, the bigger context is relationship. And that, for me, is the bottom line. Without relationship, we have nothing, it feels to me.
Where does language come into that for both Jeff and Jenny? Where do words and language and communication come with that, with the verbal and non-verbal and the in-between? I mean,
it's a very personal journey, verbal and non-verbal. And where you feel you want to set yourself at any one stage in your creative development. I mean, I was a songwriter for many years and wrote my own lyrics. And then I worked on operas and I set the librettos of other people. And I knew exactly about word setting and how I wanted every single quaver to go that, you know, helped the word come across in the right way. And then I was kind of completely fed up with words and I just wanted to go non-verbal, and I did that and I'm sort of now, just after about 15, 20 years, coming back to a kind of mix of non-verbal with spoken word. And that seems to be my new middle way. So, you know, whereas, you know, word setting and melodies and harmonies and things, I've gone right away from that into sort of drones and meditational and chanting, and because I wanted to get deeper inside, because, you know, there's a kind of cleverness and a kind of a giftedness that can kind of take over. And it was almost like I was saying, the gift is too powerful. Who am I? Who am I underneath the gift?
Yeah.
And that was quite a sacrificial thought in a way, because it meant giving up quite a lot. But because the gift had its own sort of momentum and could just go on generating and generating material, it didn't quite meet the vulnerable, suffering, and spiritual part of me that didn't want to be clever, didn't want to be over imaginative, just wanted to get grounded and get healed. And that's quite my personal sort of journey in a nutshell there. Oh, we've lost Hyacinth.
No,
Oh, she's still there. She's
Just
just gone off the screen. Okay. So I am for creativity, whether you're texting it, whether you're jamming with spoken word, whether you're word setting in a very precise way, whether you're using found text from other people, or whether you're doing non-verbal mumbling. I don't mind, so long as you're doing what's right for you.
I think I certainly often feel a block towards making sound, because the thinking part of me goes, no, it has to make sense, or I have to make a decision as to what I'm communicating. And when there's an infinite amount of possibilities, I almost find it difficult to even to think of one. So it'd be interesting to kind of try breaking that, rather than having to have a clear stimuli.
Yeah, and so we begin our training begins, as I say, you know. So as a leader, I would say to you, yeah, let's take it step by step. So I've given you my kind of wide spectrum that I've traveled across over 40, 50 years. But I'm not saying, you know, I'm not trying to open a window to make you think I don't know where to start, because that's my, you know, decades long sort of thing. You know, you're at the beginning of your creative adult life, and I meet you. This is me as leader. I meet you where you're at. What's the image of this morning? What's the image of this evening? What's the sound of now? You know, we go right back into present moment and meet you where you are at. So I forget everything I have just said to you. I don't think about it. I'm with you and finding out about you. But somewhere in the back, I've got all that that's informing how I help you. Jeff, was there something you wanted to add?
Well, I mean, I'm coming from a speech perspective, yeah, and so it's not really singing as such, although my relationship to speech is that speech is music. And my relationship to speech is that speech is actually gesture. It's not abstract meaning. So when one comes into even a single word, the fact that I understand what that word means does not mean I bring life to that word. So if I take, for example, the word sink, I don't just go, oh, I know what a sink, I know what sinking is. I actually hear through the sound relationships that the word does that. It does that. And if it's not a sink, but a sink that you wash your dishes in, then the word does sink, and it doesn't go sink. So it's the continual relationship of the sounds that every language uses, vowels and consonants, and how they relate to each other in terms of movements, in terms of gestures, not in terms of meaning. I've worked in about 15 different languages. And it's just so incredible how different languages express the same thing from a totally different perspective. It's like, well, what is an elephant? If you describe it from the front or from the back or from above or from the side, you get a different picture, but everything is living as a wholeness. And that's my approach to language. And that's why I have no problems with the verbal side of it, because it's not verbal in the intellectual sense of it. It's living into the will element of the language, of the sounds, of the shapings. And then when you come to sentences, the musical structure of a sentence, what is a verb, what is a noun, how do they function, how does an adjective work with a noun, how does an adverb work with a verb, etc., etc., etc. Grammar becomes musica. Grammatica and musica meet completely. And that's the Steiner approach, which I'm lucky enough to have found my way to when I was 24. And I've been working with it ever since. And I feel freed in it. Then when I started singing the Gregorian, in which the word is sacrosanct, and it's all in monody, with, we said drone, I sang the drone a lot. I love the drone. Somewhere when it started becoming polyphony, something got lost, I felt. Something got lost. And then in the end, with that, you could almost say the words were not important. And very often you cannot understand things unless you've got a libretto in front of you, because the words are so stretched out and things are, but in Gregorian or in Orthodox singing, it's absolutely clear. You hear every word, even if it's beautified, you hear everything. It's absolutely clear. So yeah, that's where I'm coming from. It was interesting, this four voice element for the singing. I mean, it's obvious. It's so pretty obvious if you relate it to the orchestra and to the quartet. It's pretty obvious. In the speech, there is also a four voice quality, which a person called Stuart Pearce brought in. I mean, I've worked a bit with Stuart. You know Stuart Pearce. Yeah. And I didn't start working with him because the Steiner method has a three voice quality. But actually, when I met Stuart Pearce's work and adopted it to my own, rather than going into Stuart Pearce's work, because some of it I don't quite agree with, doesn't really matter. I'm a bit like that. I'm quite eclectic. I take hold of things from other sources and find the relationships. The four voice, I inform, I soothe, I have power, and I grieve. Which is, I inform the violin, I soothe the viola, I have power, I have strength, the cello, and I grieve the deep voice, the double bass. It's absolutely perfectly there, and it works a treat. You can also hear when you're listening to people speaking where they are particularly, and also different languages sit. Tomatis's work, I don't know if you heard of Tomatis. His work revolves around that. So the English voice, particularly the untrained English voice, tends to be head. I inform, I inform, I inform. And
particularly down south.
Maybe even more down south. I don't know. Yeah, probably.
Because of received pronunciation.
Yeah,
I mean, from what you were saying, it made me think a lot of Shakespeare and his use of onomatopoeia, and obviously he would make a lot of his own words, and how the phonetics of the words and the shape is charged with the meaning of the word, and also how you come to associate, in our education.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a very important element with Shakespeare, because most people nowadays, modern actors, ignore the fact that it was written in iambic pentameter. When you ignore the rhythm of the writing, something intellectual imposes itself on it, and it doesn't work in the same way. The very famous "to be or not to be, that is the question," is usually "to be or not to be, that is the question." Yeah, that is the question is an intellectual statement, and it's not how he wrote it. It is "that is the question," which is much more true to what he's meaning. But it's a visceral experience as opposed to an intellect experience, where the actor tries to make it sound as if it was normal, everyday street language. And it's not.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. I think what's interesting as well is that, I mean, RP, I'm sort of, to relate it to I sort of relate it to politics, really. It does have a kind of imperialistic element to it, just in the sense that it's about sort of not showing emotions, and whereas regional accents, I think that it's they sort of show more, but that makes me again think of the importance of this sort of the yogic or sort of Eastern philosophical element there, because obviously that's going to you know, that very British way of kind of trapping things up is gonna trap a lot of things inside.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
And
I
yeah.
thank my lucky stars. I'm English speaking, but I was born in South Africa, because
Right.
I don't have that problem in myself. I struggled with it when I first moved to this country, that people would sort of go like this when I was speaking, because I had, as one of my students said, a lion voice, and they couldn't bear it. And I tried to stop it in myself, and I realized, to hell with this. This is nonsense. Be who you are. Don't try and adapt and become English. So, I mean, what you say is absolutely right, Jim. There is that imperialistic quality that comes over. No, we're better than all the rest.
Which is fine, you know. I'm not saying it's sound, you know. I'm not saying it's a lesser way. You know, all ways of speaking are fantastic, but I just think it's interesting how, you know, maybe on the one hand, regional accents are potentially, you know, more almost folk, you know, than and the performativity of the voice. I mean, in terms of leadership and communication, it makes me think of, you know, this sort of Tai Chi element to it, but could perhaps be an approach of being with your emotions and then trying to resonate what your intention is and communicating that, rather than you know, learning a specific rigid technique of speaking that will you know, communicate a specific thing, but more a fluid and free form. Does that make sense? That sort of distinction between something's very, very rehearsed and very performative, and the other is more organic, more of an organic kind of share of how you communicate.
Yeah, let's bring Hyacinth in, because I think she's waiting to speak.
Yeah, thank you. Because I also am very interested in how like words sound also connect us to all the previous instances when that word and sound was uttered. You know, like the collective unconscious, tapping into that, connecting through space, time. You know, like how they say like the keys or certain music, certain songs are gateways to other dimensions, or you know, the word om has been uttered in such reverence for many, many centuries, and how, you know, the power of like tapping into that, you know, you tap into, I guess, the world that, you know, was created out of many, many people's like uttering that in that frame of mind. It's just interesting to tap into that as well, I think.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I mean, you're talking about the syllabic power of mantra.
Yeah, but also like, you know, I've heard like, for example, like the Aborigines, you know, they would sing song lines to heal, not just to like navigate, but also to heal the grid. I mean, there's like a lot of layers to it. So there's that, and then there's also the, you know, like whenever we change moods, our you know, sare gamma might change as well, you know, in the Chloe Goodchild naked voice work. You know, where is your sa today, in a sense? But the nuances there as well, like what Jeff was saying about sync, you know, it depends how you say it. There's like some nuance to it, whether it goes down or is it just like a fixed material thing there. Which reminds me of some like Meissner work where, you know, you would like just say the same thing over and over, but there's something underneath it subconsciously that's going on, but we're not aware of it. And I think that that's where the power of music lies, because it brings us out of our normal conversation and interaction into something that's deeper, that we more and more tap into, you know, through the work.
Remind me what Meissner work is again. That name rings a bell, but
I mean, I've done like one course of it where, you know, two people would sit in front of each other and they would just comment on the same thing, like, I like your shirt. And then the other would also say, I like your shirt. And then it's just that I know it's kind of strange, but it's just like essentially like you keep saying it to each other, but then the observation there is how the tone, like there's some, you know, nuance in how you say it, and there's like another layer of communication going on that is not in the words,
Gotcha.
by just like, you know, like removing the need for words, essentially.
Tonality of it, not in the actual text of it.
And
In-
Meisner was an innovative theatre man in America, coming out of the so-called American Stanislavski method and developing his own way of working. This was one of the very first exercises of a whole load of exercises, in which is called repetition. And it's, you just stand in front of the other person and you just say what the first thing that comes into your mind without the intellect getting in the way, and responding, and you're not blocking anything. You're trying, it's a bit like improvisation, always saying yes to something and then adding.
Okay.
Yeah, that's more or less. I mean, interesting man.
Right. Well, listen, I mean, what a lovely spiel of spiral is the word I'm looking for. Spiral of connections and overlaps in your interests. All three of you, actually. How can I serve you is sort of what I'm thinking of asking, is where are you each at in terms of thinking about applying for the apprenticeship? I know that Jim, you've just literally noticed it in the last day.
Yes.
Jeff, you probably saw one of my sponsored ads on Facebook.
I saw it yesterday.
Yesterday, and
Yeah.
you've been around for a while, but do you need any sort of the basic information about it? Like, for example, the deadline for applications is February.
I feel stuck, to be honest, with the 1,500 word
Okay.
requirement, so I couldn't go. And also, like, you know, the links, I guess the links could just be anything that describes ourselves, isn't it? Or
Yeah, I'm glad
because
you
it's
asked.
just where to start or like what to select.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I'm wondering, and particularly in your case, actually, is, you know, what's your background? I haven't quite got that yet. So, you know, something that introduces yourself.
Okay.
You know, whether it's you know, something that first inspired you to start looking into this kind of thing, or a demonstration of an artist that you are learning from at the moment through listening and copying, that sort of thing. So it's really things that give me an indication about where you're at. I mean, ideally, if it includes you in action, that's the first priority. So if you've got any material that you can send where you're actually doing something, singing or performing or teaching or leading in some way, that's what it's, or meditating and chanting, anything like that, that just gives me a taste of you in action.
And the 1,500 word is an introduction of my background and my...
Yes, I think I've put some guidelines on that, about how to go about writing that 1,500 words.
Mm-hmm.
And just ignore it if it's not helpful. But you know what I'm hearing, the little kind of indications I'm getting from you about references to the grid and the collective unconscious and song lines, and I'm hearing somebody who's on a spiritual journey that is super cosmic. Right. So
I thought your comments were very insightful, Hyacinth. I think you should definitely create art and think, just really, really interesting points.
But I think what Jeff mentioned as well is something that I need to learn more in terms of using voice and looking at building relationships rather than just more self-development and focus on, you know, like...
Well, maybe you should go and work with Jeff. It's a question of whether you want to work with the sounding voice or the spoken voice. And Jeff's in a way my counterpart. I would say he's a sort of soul traveler, but he's on a parallel journey, working with text, and I'm working with the sounding voice, which can include text, but also includes non-verbal articulations using consonants and vowels that don't actually relate to a known language. And this is where it actually gets to the place where I'm talking about unknown language. Some people call it the light language. Some people call it a soul language. Some people just call it rhubarb, you know, but why do we want to shape the vowel that we want to shape and put the consonant we want to put with it at that moment? It brings something in our energy field into a greater aliveness, greater alignment, or it activates some release that we're looking for to get through a block. So you may think that the best consonant vowel combination is kadabrumtach, because that will just slightly open up that side of you, or drop you down into the brum of your tach, you know. It's a kind of very intuitive practice, creative, spontaneous, and the spontaneous is really important because it bypasses the logic mind. And those are places where you can open up into new universes. And yeah, go ahead, Jim.
So in that sense, because I mean, I know immediately that I love to do the course, but at the moment I have to think about things which, unfortunately, for their sort of practical application for my goals this year. But in terms of then having a sort of toolkit and being able to, you know, have different, basically, you know, paints on the paint palette to then draw on for kind of a practice-based music making and stuff. Even with its spontaneous, the spontaneous nature of it, will it still be useful for that as sort of songwriting tool? And you would think, or perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, it might change your approach to song.
That's what I'm looking for. That would be great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if it changes the approach. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
there is an approach.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So if you're happy to work within a sort of formulaic song structure, but within that 32 bars, you can go wild. And then you come back to your refrain in the next 32 bars and you stick to the plan. And then in the next 32 bars, you go spinning out. And then you come back again to structure. You know, you can make simple forms that give you space for freedom, and you can block it out on Logic in your software if you want, and you just say those 32 bars is a solo improv.
Yeah, I mean, I really love minimalism, so it might be that, okay, you have a very minimal thing, but then how can the small aspects of the sound change? Even if the note remains, can you improvise around that note, or so that there is a formula, but there's small improv elements? I don't know, but
oh yeah, I mean, minutiae is an endless journey, you know, a variation, and that's about where you work in vocal Tai Chi to really understand how the sounding voice is just like, you know, you have to open it right up. And then as you open it up, as you get the full spectrum, you start to see all these crevices and nuances and tiny lights that if you go towards them, they suddenly kind of brighten up and become huge. But you have to know how to.
Sorry, Jenny, I just realized, sorry, it's my ADHD. I do have to go because I have a meeting in 1 minute, but thank you so much. And what I'll do is I'll send you an email, and we can go from there. And yeah, and Jeffrey, I'll research your work as well, and would love to have a chat with you for the theatre stuff I do, sort of separate thing. But yeah, thank you for that. Sorry, I have to go suddenly.
All right. Thank you for coming. Speak soon.
Yeah.
So
Cheers, Jim.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
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 Yeah, I have a question, Jenny, and that is, why do you call it Vocal Tai Chi? It could be any other name, but why Tai Chi?
I wrote a little piece about that. How did Vocal Tai Chi come about? And it's now just been posted on the Facebook Vocal Tai Chi page. And in a nutshell, because I learned Tai Chi in the 80s.
Okay.
So when I was improvising and exploring North Indian alaps,
Okay.
vocal alaps, I was moving my arms, my hands, my body in a Tai Chi kind of style while singing the Indian alaps.
Yeah.
And I was doing my own kind of improvisatory version of that. And a friend of mine said, it looks like a vocal form of Tai Chi.
Oh, run. Ah, wonderful.
And I went, Tai Chi, well, there you go.
Yeah.
Just stuck.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, what the arm does informs what the voice can do. And the two are totally connected. When you are connected, I mean, you can also not be connected, but when you are connected, it gives a quality of movement and gives the tone also in the speech voice. I mean, the speech, you must understand, the speech technique from the Steiner perspective is not to do with the intellect at all. It's really got to do with, similar as you described, the only difference is you're speaking out, you're not sounding in, as it were, shall we say, so that the vowels each have their own life quality, which is different. An R is different to an A, is different to an E, is different, etc., etc. And that's the basis then of all mantric work as well. And the way in which the breath streams through an R and what forms the soul out of an R is totally different to an E. And when they all sound the same, then things are not alive. So the sounding is vital for living speaking. You don't go into the intellect whatsoever. The intellect manifests itself, the meaning manifests itself within the sounding. And that's where it meets the singing. The only difference, as I experience it with singing or chanting, is what is the gestural direction of my breath? From my experience, the singing breath comes from below up and rises, or from high up and comes down. And the speaking voice comes from above, through you and out towards the other, towards the who you're speaking to. If it's a big audience or if it's a single person, even on screen, there is a stream that wants to go through, wants to touch and meet, so that you're actually speaking in the other person. You're not speaking at the other person. And the only way you can do that is through the tones. But this is where the problem comes when you're singing words. When you're singing words, but the words become unimportant, you might as well just sing vowels. And this is what I hear very often in choirs, even Bach. I would prefer it if it didn't have words at all. I would prefer it if it was just rolling musical soundings. When I was in Greece, I had this incredible experience up in the Parthenon, when they first had the museum at the top, not down the new one down the bottom. I was in the Parthenon and I had earplugs in because I didn't want to hear the stuff that people were speaking about this incredible art, because people speak such banal stuff about this beautiful art. I didn't want to hear it. I wanted to live with it for myself. And I suddenly heard these choirs singing. It was an amazing singing sounding. I couldn't believe it. I took them out and it stopped. I put them back in, it came again. I can't explain it to this day what it really was. I mean, my mind can give reasons, but it was just the most incredible experience of sounding, living sounding coming out of these living sculptures in this living place on the top of the Acropolis. It was an incredible experience. I've tried it in other places and it didn't really work. It only worked there very strongly. But it had nothing to do with words, with meaning words. It had pure sounds. It was pure sound. It was wonderful.
Well, that's why I wonder whether you're drawn to vocal Tai Chi, because it is largely a non-verbal practice in its sort of foundational state.
Yeah, I've been aware of the Roy Hart Theatre for maybe 30 years. I
Yeah,
mean, him being South African as well, and I've
Yeah.
been aware of it. And I nearly went to France, but I didn't.
right.
And I mean, in a way, the work that I'm doing is really, as you say, it's parallel to the work that you're doing. And I'm sure, just as I found the Gregorian informed my speaking voice enormously,
Mm.
and I'm sure that this would do the same thing. And when I was training, I was told, don't sing. You mustn't sing, because singing takes you gestural wise in the wrong direction to the speech training that I was doing. I didn't fully agree with it, so I did carry on singing, and then I sang a lot. And now I realize if you can separate the two gestures and know what's going on, it works. I had to sing in a play. It was Pericles, and I was singing the opening words of the play. I was the storyteller guy, and I was having to sing because the director decided she wanted another voice. So there was this opera singer, trained singer, woman singing, and I was singing, and we clashed. It was really a clash because I was singing in the speech stream,
Yeah,
and she was singing in the singing stream, in the operatic singing stream. So her voice was going to sing a song, and I was going to sing a song. And so for her, I was too heavy, and for me, she was too light. It was a clash. It was an interesting clash, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's not meant, it wasn't meant to be sung, it's words. They were spoken. So I tried to use the melody that was composed, but keep them the through line of the speech stream. And I did it consciously, because I could
Yeah.
have also sung that way.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing. As long as you know what you're doing, it works. And improvisation is the basis of everything. Play and improvisation is the basis. Without the ability to play and improvise, things go boxed.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
not an easy thing. Certainly in my field, most of my colleagues don't know how to play or improvise.
Yeah.
There's,
Yeah.
but I mean, I think the Roy Hart Theatre is based on improvisational elements. It has to be.
Yes. Yes, it is. And that's one stream. I was also, training as a composer. So we did constant improvisation sessions and at the piano and vocally and so forth. So I've got that, and listening to Indian music, the improvisational quality in Indian music.
Yeah, I heard you on YouTube, which was very fascinating, actually. You've been accompanied by a guitarist. And I was saying, well, hang on a minute. Where is that voice coming from? That sounds like a harmonium. It doesn't sound like a human voice. And I was once, a nun came up to me when we were doing Gregorian singing, and I was singing the drone, and she said the same thing to me. She said, your voice is like harmonium. And I thought, well, wonderful.
Yeah,
But
well,
yours was incredible. I mean, I really literally think, hang on a minute, where's that coming from? Because you were hardly opening your mouth at all.
well, there may have been some electronic effects helping, but I'm also steeped in that sort of stillness of the drone. I'm steeped in that, so I can go into kind of a trance.
All right.
And that does give that sense of the infinite coming through the voice, and that's what the power of the drone is. I mean, it is that space where you're just in that endless open space. I've done other projects which are more based in loops and grooves and rhythmic work, and this is pre-groove, pre-loop. It's the slow alap introduction, it's the prayer, it's the meditation, and that serves another purpose for our human incarnation. We all need that stillness and spaciousness and rest.
Without that, actually, life doesn't exist. Somehow, it's the kind of basic waters of life out of which differentiation can take place. But if you can't live into the basic waters of life, then the differentiation becomes intellectual. But if the waters change, metamorphose into, yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that one. Certainly in my own work, that's also how I work with the speech voice as well. You know, the fundamental, in a way, I look at it in terms of feminine and masculine, yin and yang of voice. I'm going to call it that. And the drone is more the feminine aspect, which is nurturing and life-giving.
Yeah.
As I understand it.
Yeah. And talking of yin and yang, and just going back to you, Hyacinth, and learning more about you. Thank you, Jeffrey, because I think, you know, we've started a lovely exchange of ideas there. But Hyacinth, tell me more about your background. For example, your country of origin, anything like that you'd like to let me know about, because I'm sure that's influenced you and will help me get to know you.
Yeah, so I'm from the Philippines. I was born and raised, but I'm of Chinese origin. So, you know, my grandparents emigrated from China. And I actually moved to Hong Kong initially and then the UK. So I've been in the UK, London now for 12 years. And yeah, I essentially, uh, I just feel like I was really attracted to what you spoke about just now. And it just felt, it really resonated with me in terms of that cosmic perspective, because I mean, there's a lot of in things that I'm interested in, but that actually attracted me because it just feels like going on an unknown journey where other people are, I guess, with you as you discover more depths or more heights that you've never had before. But it's actually more than that. It's transcendent in a way. It transcends, like, you know, everything in this life. It's more like a spiritual journey in a way that's still grounded in something here, but it's totally, I think, like breaking new ground in a way, because it's not something that's very well known or very well studied, very well practiced, and it seems to be like what do you call it, dominated by like maybe secret or niche kind of I don't know, people in a way, because like it takes a certain because it's not very common to actually encounter something like this, I feel. So yeah, I think it's more about like the exploring the unknown, but exploring like something that is, I think, beyond like the self.
Well, that shows me and tells me that that's what you're looking for, and that's you know, that you've got your radar very well tuned in to you know, something that you're picking up from what I'm bleeping out, not necessarily with my words or my ideas, but I'm bleeping out a certain frequency, and I think you're probably picking up the bleeps. And you know, that you can write about that, if that's what, you know, it can be completely, you know, out there. You don't need to sort of make it like writing a school essay or something like that. You know, you just be your whole full free self in whatever way you want to be. I need to get to know the real you, okay, so that I can consider your application as fully and authentically as possible. So, you know, just don't hold back from showing me yourself.
I think that's also where maybe my question about the performance and, you know, all that, because maybe there is that sense of anxiety about even acknowledging or, you know, seeing myself in that way and being vulnerable in that way, which I know that the work would take me
Yes.
and then sharing that as well. But I think that's the thing that I need to do in a way as well, or I feel a pull towards, you know.
When you say that, I get the feeling it's going to be an initiation for you, that performance. So it will be walking through that door that you've not walked through.
Yeah.
That is a great opportunity.
Yeah.
It's totally unknown, but you'll feel supported, and you know, you'll do it in the way you do it, and it will be what it will be. So I wouldn't spend time worrying about it. I would just sort of let it go, and
Yeah.
it'll come,
Yeah.
and it will be the initiation that it is.
Yeah.
So,
Because in terms of the background, I think I've just been searching for a lot of different things, you know, and just to get to maybe that, and I'm not even sure whether is that the right path for me, but it certainly resonates at this time that I just want to, you know, I just feel like, yeah, I haven't found something yet that I'm looking for, but I'm not 100% sure what it is I'm looking for. But what you've described seems to be, you know, what would achieve that, I think.
did you want to come to the taster workshop? Did you put your name down for that?
Oh yeah, this Sunday. So
Yeah.
I'm going to that.
Oh,
So
you're coming.
I
Great. So
gave
you're
you,
going to have a
yeah,
proper
I sent you.
experience. Great. So you paid. That's right. You paid.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So we're gonna work on this on Sunday. So that's brilliant. And I wanted to mention also about, because I know you want to apply for the scholarship, and I've told you I think that there is only one full scholarship, and it is going to be a bit competitive. So you need to sort of prepare yourself that you may not get the scholarship, or you may. I don't know. I just don't know. You know, depends on your application. Depends who else applies. I'm not giving you any information about that one way or another, but I'm just saying there's only one. And other people will be applying for it too. So think about, if you don't get it, whether you could afford to come on the basis of a part grant or not as well. So just prepare yourself, because I don't, you know, for whether that's a possibility, whether you could do a GoFundMe campaign or something like that, and raise some crowdfunding to help you. You know, there are ingenuity ways to make things happen if you want to. So it's just a heads up that it's obviously quite in demand, that. So that's good. We're at 6:15. Jeff, nice to have met you. Hyacinth.
Yes, and you too.
Unless there's something else that is burning that needs to be
No,
released.
I'm glad that we've met, and I would like to somehow keep in touch and see what sharing we can do.
Okay, lovely.
I was just wondering, is it possible to email you that 1,500 word instead of putting it in the form, or, you know, just send the form with whatever I have and then email you the like the response to the other questions, or does it need to be in that form?
Why is there a problem with the form?
Like in terms of fitting the 1,500 word, I don't, and I'll figure it out if
I mean, the form is actually a bit of a an unknown quantity for me. I've never used that software before. So if you're having trouble with the form and it's not complying to 1,500 words, then of course that's my problem. I've set up the wrong.
But I'll try to find another way of accessing it.
Please do. What I've said, I just put a post up about this the other day, was make sure you save everything out of the form as well, because in case.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering as well, because
something might go wrong with the form and then you don't have a copy. So make sure you have a copy of the important juicy bits. I mean, you don't need to copy the address and all of that, but your juicy contributions need to be saved elsewhere.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Great. Thanks very much.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
I will see you on Sunday, and Jeff will be in touch.
Yeah.
Thank
Good.
you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Nice to meet you.